Hello, and welcome to Blockchain Solidarity, the podcast where we ask what blockchain can do for us. What is blockchain? What is crypto? Could it rescue us from our current dystopia? Come with us as we explore the very real potential to enhance human freedom, and as we delve into the darker side, predicting the Bond-villain potential of this current bleeding edge. Join us, a group of friends, in a pub style as we discuss the overlaps between this technology and politics, economics, the environment, culture, and sci-fi, to understand for ourselves the seemingly mysterious futuristic world on our horizon. Welcome back to Blockchain Solidarity, everyone. We're back. We've got 3 more topics. We do this every 3-4 weeks. We've got some interesting guests. You've all maybe seen them, heard from them before on our podcasts. We've got Rich Tella, founder of the Bitjoinery. We've got Hazel, co-host of Web3Workers Pod, and Yves Edwards, host of Fiat Lux podcast. I'll let the guys introduce themselves. We're going to get stuck into it because the topics are just so interesting. They're always interesting. What am I talking about? But these are really interesting ones as well. So let's get into the thick of it. But let's just go around the table and get the guys to introduce themselves in their own terms and what they're working on. Rich, let's start with you. Tell the world a little bit about yourself and the Bitjoinery and what you're shooting for with that.
Right on. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show, man, and it's gonna be a great conversation. I'm sort of 10 years in the crypto space. Last 3 years, I've been moving into the filmmaking stuff, largely focused on all the experiences I've had over that decade. Basically, I've pretty much almost met every type of character that exists in this space. So that's what kind of encouraged me to write that first script for the Fakefluencer back in 2020. And I did a few productions, put out the Fakefluencer, which is a feature, and then just recently put out like a mini series, 4-episode mini series on the hexagons, which are like a crypto community where I spent like a year and a half. Well, I say me, but I have a character who's like a crypto scamdemic investigator who lives online, and he goes and spends time with these communities, and that's where the productions kind of emerge from. However, along that journey, I realized a lot of things about the filmmaking industry and what it takes to actually get that kind of production together, which inspired me to take my own operation, which was Bitjoin Studios, over the last 9 years or whatever, and sort of start to push that in the direction of a studio DAO, which is called the Bitjoinery. So it's a kind of evolution of what I've already been doing for the last 9 years. But yeah, essentially the ultimate goal is to address all those challenges that I essentially started building it for myself. And then I spent a lot of time with the Film 3 community over the last 2 years, and I realized, oh shit, I'm not alone. So there's a lot of people out here who have similar challenges. And so I figured maybe we can start to put something together. It's a type of collective, but it addresses a lot of the indie filmmakers' sort of needs and desires. And yeah, that brings us up to sort of now. We're currently, there's a loose affiliation of people that I've met along the way on my journey, just trying to get some structure in place. So making sure that we start, I kind of feel like this needs to emerge from what I've experienced with DAOs in the past, is that it seems like if you're not there in the beginning, you kind of miss how this thing emerges into the world. And that's a really, really important part of the story. When you try to join a DAO that's already established, you would have experienced your own sort of challenges in that regard. And I'm not saying it's better to get in early because, it's a pump and dump or whatever, but I think just for clarity, and the fact that the system that you're designing needs to sort of emerge from the community or the collective itself, rather than having some organization sort of present it to the world and say, hey, look how cool this is, come on over, join it. And that's the kind of challenge I'm grappling with right now, to be fair, is how to balance that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, mate. And it does, and everyone should check it out. I've been following it really closely, and I think it's just your experience with building this is just going to tie nicely into this conversation. Folks, if you're listening, like what Rich just articulated there is like what sort of everyone in the DAO space is in one way or another going through. It's hard to get the right organization and incentivize sort of a community to grow within it, and that is going to sort of those kind of questions are going to cross over a couple of the topics that we have on the agenda today. So thanks for joining, Rich. Can't wait to get into it and hear some of the experiences that you have with the Bitjoinery and how we can sort of learn about DAOs and whatever else. Yves, let's bounce to you next. Caught a bit of your latest episode, or it may have been the second to last. I'm not actually sure, but it was with it was on Lunar DAO, and it had an individual on who was shading their voice, which is always interesting. Tell us about that episode or your most recent one. What's going on in your world? Folks, listen to this podcast because it's fascinating. But tell us what's been going on in your world over there.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the invite. My latest episode was with Lunar DAO, and they are interested in privacy and anonymity. They're an investment DAO, and basically we explored the kind of core concepts of the DAO, why, like, kind of what problem we're trying to solve, and essentially why these things are important, why things like privacy and anonymity tooling are important for society or civilization. And yeah, I think it kind of mirrors the overall sort of thesis of my podcast, in that they're heavily sort of involved in the kind of cypherpunk narrative and the Lunarpunk narrative, and furthering that and advancing that and evolving that narrative and that community. And so yeah, that's kind of what the episode's about. It's mostly about exploring Lunarpunk and cypherpunk and Lunar DAO concepts. And also my podcast itself, it kind of mirrors the overall theme of my podcast, which is to also explore those things and to educate people and kind of try and nudge people, I guess, try and nudge the crypto space as much as I can back on the right path, which is not pump and dumps and shit coins and all that kind of stuff. It's supposed to be a liberating tool that produces more freedom for people. It's supposed to be fairer in some ways, permissionless, etc., sort of anti-status quo. And there are a lot of places in the crypto sphere where it kind of is becoming quite status quo, and so yeah, I'm trying to push back against that a little bit and revive its true destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, feels the majority of this crypto space is going exactly the way that you put, unfortunately. And I caught the bit on that you guys were asking. I think your question to your guest was just how important is surveillance, and I was like, it's such an easy question. Do you know what I mean? But it was like, do you know what? Probably people take that for granted so much. Do you know what I mean? Like we all like just sort of are become accustomed to the state just intruding into our lives in every single way imaginable. And so it is that time to sort of just step back and ask those kind of questions again. Like to the everyday person, we need to just go like, surveillance is crucial, So guys, those are the sorts of questions Yves gets into in his podcast. It's just really fascinating. And it's so important, especially because the crypto world is going in the wrong direction. Yves, thanks very much for that, folks. Check out his podcast, Fiat Lux podcast. Hazel, we'll drop to you next. What's going on in your world? What's going on with the podcast? Pick anything you want. Tell the world about it. What's exciting you in the crypto space?
Hi, what's up? My name is Hazel. I generally hang out with DAOstar and Meta Governance Projects, which is a research collective. So I'm pretty much in the researchy standard side of DAOs. Yeah, I think apart from that, I do a little bit of like political. I'm like hugely interested in political art and like political narratives. So, Rich, I would love to chat with you, like both of you actually, about like just like creating narratives in this space and like just observing how people are and how things are and how people behave. I don't know. I feel like the DAO space right now feels a little dead, at least in the US, in North America, where I'm based, because the market condition is not great. And I feel like a lot of companies, like a lot of DAO tooling, DAOs are kind of suffering, and it's definitely not as vibrant as it was. But like on the other hand, I feel like we are picking up a lot of like signal from like Asia Pacific based DAOs and like DAOs around the world, which is pretty exciting. Like people are exploring like network state and like co-living experiments and yeah, whatever else. I think right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to do like a DAO compensation working group, which figures out how can DAOs compensate people legally, like what are the legal affordances a DAO needs or requires or needs to know before they start compensating anyone. Because I mean, like I care about labor movement, like compensation is super important, and like just I feel like it's just something nice to do in the bear market.
Wow, that's really interesting if you get that stood up, because that is crucial. It is in the bear market that we kind of need these sort of thought projects and go a little bit deeper, because when the market comes around again, the bull market, it just goes so fast and you get lost and it's all about the money, money, money again, isn't it? Well, that's what we'll better look forward to you getting that stood up and tracking that, Hazel. And I guess we've all mentioned DAOs in some sort of way, or in the crypto space going in a certain direction, which we're not particularly keen on, or DAOs going in a direction that we're not particularly keen on, or whatever. So it's a perfect segue into our first topic, folks, which is Cointelegraph did an article recently, and Rich, you brought this to my attention in one of the chats that you're in the Bitjoinery, I believe, and it's titled "Cybernetic Organizations, or BORGs, Are Doomed to Fail." And people listening are probably like, "What is a BORG?" And it doesn't even say what a BORG is, other than it's a cybernetic organization. And I suppose just to place this in some context. Yeah, go
No, but
ahead.
I mean, I think there's some useful information there, but the headline is absolute bait. It's so bait that it's almost useless in terms of actually what's inside the article itself. So I wouldn't put too much
Yeah.
emphasis on the headline. It's
No, the
just
headline doesn't really,
clickbait.
it
You know what I mean?
doesn't really tally up to the sort of the meat and bones of the article, but that was just for people to find it, if they're googling it. But they type in Borgs, they'll find it anyway. So basically, let me set the scene. Borgs are these sort of entities that have that people are starting to think about as a way to take some of the functions of a DAO, sort of external functions of a DAO, hiring people, legal sort of stuff, and put and automate it in a way, take it out of the human sort of governance-y aspect. And it's mainly to avoid liability for the humans in the DAO. But the article sort of gets to the crunch of, is this the way we want DAOs to go? Is it like, do we want to open the door for these automated BORGs to do some of the functions for a DAO? It's a slippery slope, I guess. And the article goes sort of, yes, it could be efficient to go that way, but it's also like a price we have to pay for like democratic governance. It's just a little bit more messy, but in the long term, it's more creative, brings people in. That's just the way the system works better when it engages community and sorts through the mess and the muddle and comes out with a better product at the end. Let me just instinctually, Rich, go to you first. Instinctively, what do you think of this? Like, where do your sort of like instincts lie? Does this make you queasy, or do you feel like actually this might be like a short-term thing, but you're not worried long-term? It might come back into the DAO, and Borgs are just like a temporary thing. What do you think?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on where your ideologies lie and what you're trying to achieve by utilizing this technology, right? I've personally spent probably too much time in the realm of ideology, and it's really only over the last maybe 2 or 3 years that I've had to come to grips with the fact that, you know, DAOs are extremely inefficient in their current form, because of all the required participation from members and what have you. Sort of becomes a sort of slow turning bureaucratic wheel which nobody really wants to participate in. I can only speak from my personal experience, but I've jumped into a bunch of them, and yeah, people just get either disheartened, or they lose distraction, or they join too many DAOs maybe, and there's too many things that they have to be involved in. So most recently with the Bitjoinery, I've realized that actually with what we're doing with these DAO structures is we're missing the autonomous element, right? We talk a lot about decentralized and organization, but what I think the end result, or what the current goal, and what's moving into the popular realm, is the autonomy, which is essentially what they're describing as BORGs in here, which is it's a centralized company that launches some specific set of software that does governance actions automatically without having to bother all the collective members. And honestly, I think that's just only going to accelerate the not the ideology, but it's going to accelerate the adoption, because, as I said before, people don't want to be caught up. They've got a lot of shit going on in their own lives. They don't need to be caught up in whether or not to vote on some meaningless stuff, right? And I mean, I'm grappling with exactly this right now, and what is, within a film production, within a production process, is like, what are the elements of this process that are, which parts are important to the collective to actually be, brought into the fold, and what is not. And honestly, it looks like it's going to be a mix of both, right? There's going to be stuff that is like in a traditional organization, which might be legal related, that the collective members have to be on board with, or economically, or, but all the sort of systemic stuff can easily be automated away and made more efficient, and it doesn't need user participation for it to work properly. All it needs is when the person signs in and agrees to join, they understand crystal clear what is autonomous, and what they're expected to participate in. But I think if you can reduce the human participation in some of these organizations' decision making, then you're going to get a lot more of an efficient DAO.
That's interesting. Yves, I want to go to you next, and Hazel, jump in if you wish here too. But Yves, if I can maybe, and this may be the wrong angle to ask you on, feel free to come back with whatever thoughts you want. But often we see when stuff does get externalized, and it sort of gets therefore operated by the current state legal system, or could the hiring of people within a DAO get outsourced to some HR company, and then back into the corporate world? You see the corporate matrix fangs coming into DAOs. Do you worry about that from a Lunarpunk sort of perspective, that we might see DAOs that could be this interesting, governance form of human beings that could be outsourced to the system, and that's the way the system slowly gets its fangs back in? Or am I just being paranoid? What do you think? I don't know. Go with what angle you want there.
No, I mean, I think it's a valid concern, and I think it's a concern that we should always have, right? That's kind of the point of crypto, right? It was born out of a kind of skepticism of the traditional system, and even the philosophy of decentralization. At least a lot of the critiques are, of the traditional system, because it's the system we exist in, and it's supposed to be an alternative. So we always have to be careful of these external entities and different ideas coming into the space. But I think Rich made some good points. There are problems with like low participation, and there's different reasons why. Like you said, maybe people part too many DAOs, etc., etc. And I think despite the fact that maybe this BORG concept is kind of like born out of one company and it's kind of a centralized proprietary thing, we do see a lot of advancements in AI right now. I mean, just the other day I saw, I think it's called Cryptonaut GPT, and it's essentially one of these like GPT models that is like, it's been optimized for like smart contracts, so it can transact and do DeFi and stuff. And there's like a little video of it, and it gives an example. It shows this AI agent swapping Matic for USDT, and it's pretty cool. It's like it's basic at the moment, but I could see how there could be very easily, and I guess already people are already working on this. Open source free alternatives to this BORG idea. So I guess my point I'm trying to make is I'm not inherently opposed to the idea, at least the overall idea, maybe not necessarily this BORG thing, but more of the meta idea of it, which is like outsourcing some of the computation, some of the transactions, and some of the work to AI or external entities. I mean, it all depends on how we do it, why we do it, and how things end up. I don't think it's inherently bad, and it might be a good solution to the problem of low participation. Maybe if you look at some of these these AI agents, they can kind of run already autonomously, doing research, and they could vote on things. They can send emails, and there's all sorts of things. So when we're talking about like, sort of joking about outsourcing HR, let's outsource we could outsource the HR to some agents instead of like some bureaucratic corporation.
That's a good
so
point.
yeah, it could be good.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like that last bit. Hazel, what do you think? Do you think there's a risk of mission creep here? Start slow, and then you find out that be it AI or corporations or the state just takes over? Or does it matter as long as the people in the DAO sort of decide what is externalized to these Borgs or whoever, and that's the ultimate arbiter? What do you worry about? What do you think here, given that you work in the DAO space? How do we incentivize people, as Yves says, as Rich says? Too many people are involved in different things. How do you get them to narrow in and incentivize them in only one DAO? What's your thoughts? Take it away.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions right there. Well, I feel like I just
Sorry.
No worries. That's great. Like, I don't personally feel extremely threatened. I think there's definitely opportunity space with regard to like uses of AI in the crypto, in the DAO space. I think in particular, I think there is the like Rich and Yves mentioned, like there is the automation aspect, right? Like there's like AI helping us to better automate tasks, right? Like in a way that it could potentially, like ideally, if done well, like increase the agency of the DAO, like help DAO like get more things done and be like autonomous, and that's great. I think like, there's another usage of AI in like just like general political advocacy. Like the AI doesn't necessarily have to like do something like execute a task very actively, but it can be sort of like a political being. Like for instance, one research case study that I heard about is the digital minister of Taiwan, Audrey Tan. I think she spun out like an AI bot of herself trained on her own data, like of her like just like giving talks, like her writings, like her beliefs, and it generally just like I think it does Q&A with like her voters and the people, like her like yeah, like the people she like sort of govern. I think normal people Taiwanese people can like go and interact with like the Audrey Tan bot and be like, what do you think of like this topic that's going to be like voted on the parliament or something like that. I think like there is some value, there might be like some potential there in like using AI and like using AI chatbot to help with like political sense making and even like some degree of political lobbying. Yeah, I think like some people mentioned like a case study to me, and like someone mentioned being really excited about having, for example, like a union chatbot, like a union like bot just like go out and advocate on like union like thoughts, because we all know like advocacy is like a really like in some ways a very draining process. They ask a lot of you, but if there's like a bot that can help you sense make ideologies and like sort of do some of the advocacy on people's behalf in like a contained way, not in the like I'm gonna flood Twitter with like all my ideology sort of thing, but in like a contained sense making interactive way, I think there's definitely some potential for DAO and crypto there.
I just wanted to jump in quick and comment on something Hazel just said. I think that's a really cool idea for people to think about. The idea that like it made what you said reminded me of something I saw the other day on Twitter, and that was someone who created an autonomous AI agent that gets like reimbursements for them. So if they've been like stiffed, scammed, or all sorts of things, but essentially the example that they get, one of the examples they gave is they fed it their bank transaction data, like years of data, and it looked through all the transactions. And then it also read his emails, and in his emails, it found a apology from one of the airlines, one of the planes that he'd went on for the Wi-Fi outage. And then it scanned his transactions, found the cost of the payment to the airline before he'd got on the plane. It then wrote a legal letter. It wrote a letter in sort of legal jargon or legalese. A professional legal letter, I should say, and it sent it automatically to the airline, and within 48 hours they had a refund. And so I think things like that, right? Like you were saying about unions, like they could sort of, you could sort of pull your transaction or your wage data or things like that, and it can look for holes or unfairness in the system essentially. So I think that could be a really interesting idea.
So this is fascinating. So I was going to make the third topic this kind of union question of should creators in the DAO space be unionized? But I'm going to bring it forward to now because it's the perfect segue into this. And so immediately two questions. Yeah.
Is it okay if I just chime in there for a sec before we move on?
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
So what I was thinking is maybe like a simple way to think about it is co-designing a co-founder through this what's described as BORGs here. So if you were to bring on earlier, your early adopters or whatever to your DAO structure, and collectively you designed a co-founder, which is essentially a bot, then what you have is everybody is on board with exactly the function of that co-founder, that bot, whatever, from the very get-go. So everybody knows exactly what its function is, and you could have an army of co-founders doing certain activities autonomously, right? But essentially, in a traditional sense, they are co-founders of the collective structure. So that's another way to sort of think about it.
That's interesting. I don't know if any of you guys want to respond to that, but I think my question was going to be just driving from what you guys have said into this kind of broader union question. And I'll just ask it straight away. My original question was going to be like, which is a bit more easy maybe to say. I would certainly say yes, but I don't know if everyone here would say yes. And the first question is, should all creators, all contributors in the DAO world unionized? Like, is that just an explicit 100%? My answer is yes. I don't know, Rich, you might have a different opinion, but hold your answer to that one, because I'll go to you with the second one as well, and everybody else can answer both also. If we're talking about AI as contributors and offering so much value, should they be in the union of their own agency as well? Should the union be AI contributors, robots, bots, whatever you want to say, as well as human contributors as well? And what sort of complications does that bring into the equation if you have, contributors in a union with humans or founders in a who are also contributors? of a DAO in a union? Like, Rich, let's go to you first because you made the last point. How would you
Yeah,
think about
and I
that
think
in the context of your DAO? Yeah.
no, and I think it's a perfect segue actually, because again, unions or traditional unions typically have like bosses, right? Leaders. This is where a lot of the friction occurs in the traditional
Right.
story. And so if again, coming back to this idea of designing a co-founder collectively, so that everybody is like on point together from day one of what the function is, then I mean, sure, why, like if you could do that and there was no sort of, I mean, arguably I don't know, people are gonna people is a thing that I often say. So people have all kinds of things going on in their lives, but an autonomous piece of software will only execute upon what it's designed to do by the very collective that designed it. So in that sense, creators, if creators should unionize, I don't know that going the traditional path is going to be very, very useful long term, but perhaps through like some of the tools that were described earlier on, there is an opportunity there for creating some sort of new type of union which comes into existence through the very people that require such a function in their system, right? Rather than having humans execute upon. Because again, humans often have things going on in their life. Stuff changes, so that's what happens. They deviate, or they get corrupted, or God knows. There's a number of things, right? But if you can put that into a autonomous entity within a DAO structure, then perhaps if everybody is on board and they spend a long enough time thinking about how to design it with all the risks in mind, maybe you have something. I don't know. I don't know if it's been done before, but I mean, in terms of the Bitjoinery, like I say, I'm currently in the midst of constructing some very sort of fundamental stuff here in terms of the tokenomics and how that whole thing's going to operate. And I've personally identified a lot of things that I believed about how it should operate. And then I realized I don't have all the answers, and that's where I think the collective or the initial, founding team, whatever you want to call it, should be responsible in building that function together. Because
Hazel, let me bring in Hazel here. Hazel, what do you think about this? Do you agree with what Rich is saying? Do you see any potential complications between core teams, founders versus contributors versus non-human contributors in the form of AI? Should all creators and AI and founders unionize? How do you see it working given the world that you operate in? Yeah.
Right. I would love to ground the conversation a little bit more in reality, right? Because I think I largely agree with Rich. Like I think AI right now is a tool. I don't think AI is at the level of like AGI, or AI is at the level of like sentience. Like it's not like a fully autonomous being. And I think it still requires like a large amount of direction and a large amount of like prompts in order to operate. Like it is a powerful tool. I feel like in some ways, like vaguely, I could believe in the future where there's actual AGI, right? Like sentient AI contributors that fully automate on their own. But I think right now, like the relationship, the where tech is right now, like is I don't think tech is there yet. I think mostly right now it's human working with these like amazing AI tools, and yeah.
I mean, do you think though that even halfway there is enough of a kind of boost to really do something, to really change something? So does it really matter that do they have to be sentient? Like how sentient do they have? Like how far along that spectrum do they have to be for it to be useful?
Yeah, I'd like to add a bit more context there as well, because I wasn't specifically describing an AI. I was thinking of it more in terms of a smart contract, or a string of smart contracts working in collaboration. But how tokenomics within those smart contracts is designed by the initial collective. I'm not specifically describing a sentient AI that does this function. Like, that might be how it appears on the front end to the user, but on the back end, I view it more as a collection of smart contracts that are doing a certain set of functions in a certain set of orders. So it's a really kind of banal stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, I think like that's exactly what I'm hearing, right? I'm just sort of responding to Alex of having like fully recognizing like an AI as a union member. Like that sounds a little bit far. Although it would be really exciting too. I think that's like a big question, you know, like what makes us a human, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I do feel like I think one thing I'm particularly excited about is like is like AI tool enabled interactive or autonomous art, right? Like I think that's like I think there's huge potential in like AI democratizing content creation and like just like enabling is like I see it as enabler to help people complete tasks. And yeah, and I think like having like a front end like in like AI interactive way like seems like something that's really nice and really good. Yeah, I don't yeah.
So if we take AI out of the question of unionization here, and we just think of human contributors on just sort of on this basic foundation question of, because I know some people don't agree with it, don't believe this. Should all creators unionize? Should they at least be allowed to unionize? Should be obligatory in every DAO? Or should we not force that upon DAOs? Yves, let's go to you on that. Like, what do you feel? What's your instinct there? Because I know a lot of people in the, let's say, the crypto left don't necessarily, they kind of squirm, some of them at the, you know, at the thought of unions in Web3. They see that as a more traditional model. No, let's just keep it out. What way do you see it? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, Yves, go.
No, it's cool. Go ahead, Hazel.
Yeah, I just want to say that I feel like, in my opinion, like I feel like DAOs are not fully mature in its current form. Like it has a lot of problems, like participation and like incentive and tokenomics and whatever else. And these are, I don't think I've seen like one good example of like a perfectly running DAO or something like that. I think DAOs are not perfect, but it does have like really good things going for it and has like huge potentials. I think as with unions, I think there are problems with the current form of unions, right? Like the like hierarchical thing is like really intense, and like I think there's a huge problem with unions being more like ossified throughout time, and like having like a more like having like leadership, union leadership, be like a more like politically like fixed or like solid or rigid thing. I think that's a problem that unions face. Yeah, I think like unions in the current form is not its perfect form, and it kind of needs to be reformed. And I don't think DAOs have reached the perfect form either. So I think like maybe the best policy or approach is to learn something from each other. I think union have really good, like does a good job in like hearing from its members, at least like early union when they form. There's a lot of narratives in like worker empowerment and like taking lessons and hearing from the like lived experience of its workers, right? And forming like consensus or narrative there. I think that's something that DAO can do a little better. Is to like listen to more of like the creators' voices and focus on the creators' lived experiences with regard to compensation, with regard to like what's it like working in a DAO. And I think, yeah, I think DAOs can be, yeah, I guess I wonder. I think like DAOs is like a larger question. Is like, does DAO like have to be like financial? Like, does it need to be financialized by a token? Like, how does reputation work in a DAO? I think it's a more complicated question.
Let's go to Yves for his thoughts, then we'll go back to Rich on what he would think when if the contributors in his DAO unionized. But Yves, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see unionization as a bad thing if in the crypto space. I understand that there are issues with the traditional way of doing things. I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here and maybe throw something different in the mix. And sure. It also relates to the broader DAO discussion we're having, but as well as the union discussion. You know, it's possible that some of these problems, low participation, you know, the kind of like hierarchical nature of the traditional unions, etc. It's possible that maybe introducing, you know, elements of physicality, or geography, are, you know, more important than we think, right? So, like, is it the case that sometimes DAOs suffer from participation and people get overwhelmed, and, you know, maybe things don't get done as well as they could because there is, you know, to relate to the AI question thing as well, you know, there is like a lack of, like, you know, physical connection, you know, like IRL as we call it. Maybe that inhibits us in some way. Maybe with the DAO structure overlaid on top, but like the physical kind of vibe of a union, you know, maybe you know, maybe it'll work. I don't know. Maybe that solves some of the problems.
Rich, what do you think? What if in a year's time the Bitjoineries fly in and all your contributors turn around and go, right, we're joining indie documentary creators union? Well, how would you look upon that?
I would look back at what I had put together up to that point and realize that I clearly had failed, because, like I said earlier on, I believe that all the most useful and relevant aspects of a union should be embedded or from day one, so that we don't get to that point. But just to pull up on what Yves was saying there about IRL, the thing with IRL contact is you can get immensely deeply connected with other individuals that you just cannot achieve as quickly in the digital realm, right? Those kind of connections that you can get in real life in just spending an hour together chatting at a cafe or an event or whatever. That kind of connection can take upwards of a year or more to make through the digital realm, largely because there are so many other distractions, and you know, mistrust and what have you that comes with the digital realm. So I think in real life is super important, and I would love to make it a large part of the Bitjoinery going forward. And then just to add additionally, when it comes to having a decent, sorry, I'm quite tired, so I've been up since 4 a.m.
It's all good.
Additionally, I think if you can remove as many friction points from a DAO in terms of how, you know, conversely from the IRL, if you can reduce the friction points in your DAO structure to the bare minimum so that you don't provide any potential spots for it to become a bureaucratic headache for everybody, and allow whatever the function of the DAO is, allow that to be the priority and perhaps the only medium of communication. So, for example, in the filmmaking DAO that I'm doing here right now, I would rather that each participant in this structure is only communicating, you know, for the benefit of exactly what their role is in the production process. That everything else, they don't, you know, they shouldn't have to give a shit about. They should be focused on doing what they love to do. So if we can push all the dull stuff into a smart contract or automate it in somehow, then I think it's going to allow the participants to focus on what they're there for, actually, rather than getting involved in every single small decision-making process. You know, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. The only question is how that comes into existence, because it's very important that everybody is on the same page and crystal clear of how the system functions from day one, you know, and you know, how does it evolve? How does it change? Who are the stakeholders that have some sort of voice in the change, if there should be any at all? And that's when you get back into the more interesting decision-making processes, but those will be relatively few because of the journey is so long.
Yeah, and I think my immediate thought to that was like some people might find some of those more banal aspects of a DAO that some of the creative people find boring, that other people might find the banal parts more interesting. Let me move it into the final topic with the 10 minutes that we have or so left. We'll run over a little bit. But I think it's like the discussion today, like we've had so far, kind of ties nicely into this next bit. And it's for folks listening, like over the last kind of couple of weeks within Blockchain Solidarity Collective, folks, including on this call and others that are not, have been sort of brainstorming ways in which we can bring smaller creators together in a kind of alliance, in a kind of a collective outside of blockchain solidarity, to share resources, to share ideas, to grow together essentially, because it's very difficult for small creators right now, especially in the bear market, to grow. So how can we lift each other up? How can we take the smaller creators and lift them up together? And so some of us here have been brainstorming how that can be done. How can we get grantees, grants, funding, sponsorship, whatever you want to say. And so I think let's take the last sort of 10 minutes here and brainstorm some things from our own sort of worlds, our own experience that might incentivize small creators to want to get involved, and then how maybe if we move it along the next step, let's say we get them interested, how do we, in what structure do we gather them together? I would assume a DAO, and then we can kind of talk about how that would look like. But let's go to Yves first. As a fellow podcaster, and because we want to start this kind of collective idea with maybe 5 to 7 other small podcasters, startup podcasters, what are the sort of things, Yves, that you'd be thinking about from your perspective that you'd want to see that could entice you to get involved in such a collective effort? And what are the sort of things that you'd just be like, you know what, no, like, come and get me further down the line when you're a little bit more developed? Because I think we have to be thinking about that too. What are some of the things you'd be thinking about there?
Yeah, I guess. Well, so just going off the back of what you just said, that kind of made me think. You know, I guess what would I like right now? I suppose one of the questions for me, and most people starting podcasts, at least in the initial stages, is how do I monetize? And so I would say help with monetization would be one of the I imagine primary goals and reasons that people would join. That's in some ways enough of an incentive, right? We help you get monetized. So yeah, maybe that in itself is enough, plus the community and just people helping and educating each other and boosting each other, signal boosting, and so yeah, I think.
What are you, just on that point then? What do you think are some of the ways we can bring Rich in here, because I know he's been sort of looking at some of this stuff for his DAO and his collective idea as well. What are some of the ways you think it could be better or easier to monetize collectively rather than sort of as an individual podcaster?
Well, I mean, I guess in my mind right now, I've got this project called Fan DeFi. It's something I heard about maybe over a year ago now. And they essentially have this idea of backer tokens, and so it's in some ways like a Kickstarter kind of thing. It's crowd funding, but it's meant for artists and for independent filmmakers, independent artists, musicians, etc. And essentially you buy a backer token, so you sort of fund them up front, and then in the backer token you essentially get like shares of their project. So if they were to sell an NFT, one of their projects, one of their NFTs or artworks on FanDeFi, and you have some of their backer tokens, then you essentially get a percentage of the revenue from the auction. So yeah, that's something that kind of comes to mind. Maybe some kind of backer token, because I guess the idea of being monetized, you can either just help people monetize or you can pool the monetization, right? So you can sort of assure at least that a little bit for everyone, that kind of idea. And so with that, I guess you would have to have some assurance of how people are going to get those funds. And then that's the kind of where the FanDeFi thing comes in, that kind of backer token idea. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the best idea or the way to do it. That's just one way that I know of. And so the icky side, I guess, would be that going wrong or becoming corrupt. So it would be, maybe funds not being distributed correctly, or some people take in more than others. I guess that's the same thing as the funds not being distributed. There could be cultish like behavior. Maybe it becomes insulated. Right, we're all like in our own little bubble, and it becomes like influencery. Maybe that's a concern, I suppose. So yeah. I think.
Yeah, that is sort of difficult, and sort of working out those boundaries between sort of how do you sort of let the individual podcasts, kind of like sort of go with their own creation and sort of like target sort of monetization off the back of that, and then how much do they keep, how much goes back into the pool, versus sort of another model that could be sort of top down sponsorship. I don't know, like we all say sort of, okay, we'll all run a clip, 2 or 3 clips of our podcast each week, and we'll share it all between ourselves, and collectively we'll get like 200,000 people looking at it all together. And so, hey, Lens Protocol, do you want to stick your logo on each clip? Yeah, okay. And we'll give you $1,000 a week and split that between all 5 podcasts. Could be something like that. I mean, go ahead.
You could essentially become an agency. You could be sort of like a decentralized agency where your job it's kind of more hierarchical, but you could try your best to do it in a fair way, or maybe not hierarchical, but more centralized. You could essentially negotiate on behalf of the people. Maybe there's some prerequisites. Maybe you say, look, you have to do this many a week. You have to do that, X, Y, and Z, because maybe that's just like the standard requirement for a lot of sponsors. So you at least want to, it looks good for the sponsors, right? The sponsors know if they contact you, there's going to be a certain level of quality or a certain standard, right? Oh, our advertisements are going to be in 2 podcasts a month, or 3 podcasts a month, or whatever it is, or they're going to be in 10 videos a month or 5 videos a month, and they're going to get this many views, X, Y, Z. So yeah, I would think maybe you could do that. You could the idea is actually more like being an agency, and your job is to like produce the best kind of negotiation for the creators. Maybe it's one of those things. It's not necessarily about like pooling our resources and that kind of thing.
Well, I could still see, and this is maybe the question where Hazel and Rich come in with their experience. I could see how sort of in a DAO structure, a sort of each pod host comes together from all 7 pods, if you like, and sort of makes a decision as to who's going to do what, who wants to do what are minimal requirements, and then how to spread the funds. Rich, let's bring you in here on that. Do you have any thoughts about funding models that you're looking at for your collective that could work here? And how do you think, just on this governance question, it could work? What are some of the things? I know you've been looking at this a lot on your end. What are some of the things you're looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what Yves just described there is getting pretty close to what I'm sort of arriving at as well. A lot of the functions or the potential risks around the individual collectives' behaviors in terms of how they interact with the system, from what I've gathered, can actually be programmed into the logic of the tokens themselves. So I think a lot of those concerns can be addressed again if you prescribe the correct logic from day one to with all these risks in mind for individual participants, and then just have the DAO or the studio function as an agency in that regard. I personally am, I'm still sort of in early phase of structuring how these participants ought to behave. And of course, it's not compulsory. You don't have to participate, but if you would like to, then these are the rules, right? And they're rules that are dictated again by those very first collective members that choose to prescribe the logic to those assets that are used or owned by the participants. So I'm, like I say, I'm still in quite early phases, but I can tell you that I have been studying the Film 3 space for nearly 2 years, and I've watched maybe over 100 projects now in this space throw shit at the wall. And I'm a firm believer that it's not always great to be first. You can learn a lot from other people's and other companies' projects, leaders' failures along the way. And that's kind of what I'm relying on in terms of how to get the design right for my specific case. When it comes, there is a crowdfunding element to what I'm doing and a crowdsourcing element in terms of talent. So when my theory is when capital meets talent, magic happens. And it's just trying to get that balance right and put in the correct rules from day one to make sure that those, the talent and the capital meet each other in the right way in order to benefit one another going forward. And I honestly believe, like, we've been speaking for maybe 6 months now, man, but once I figure this shit out, it's going to probably work pretty good for podcasts as well as films, It's just a case of getting it right from the beginning. Because once you program in all that logic and people can look at it and decide whether or not they want to participate, I mean, that's going to be the attraction, right? Making it real simple for them to understand how this thing operates. Really, really simple. Throw out all the technical jargon, throw out all the financial economical jargon, and just talk about the pure utility of what this thing does.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I suppose maybe I'm thinking about it too narrowly, but I'm sort of thinking as if you target sort of 5 to 7 podcasts, the podcast hosts are the main creators. Of course, they have their producers and editors and whatever else, on the side, but you could consider the podcast host as the main creator who, within a DAO structure, say, that does the multi-sig, they're the central point of focus for the creation and for the on their behalf for the governance as well. So it makes it a little bit easier, perhaps, than having to deal with a whole pile of different creators who have different levels of stakes in the whole thing.
I mean, I think it's easy to try to default to a more simpler design system, but honestly, I think you have to empower those individual subgroups within a community. It's why, for example, right now I'm thinking,
sure,
because I know I have several subgroups within this community that I want to build. One thing that's come up most recently is that there shouldn't be one universal treasury that has multi-sig or whatever. There should be, you should decentralize the treasury itself as well, so that each subgroup within a community has their own treasury. And I don't know if I don't think I've seen that done before.
I agree. No, I agree. I agree. I think sort of where I was going with that was almost you have to have the podcast host as almost like a little mini representative for everyone else. So that say if funding comes in, if you're taking the agency sort of structure, where the 7 podcast hosts are lining up on the multi-sig to determine how this is all going to be done, and then funding gets allocated to each podcast, and then that podcast host is responsible for the further funding and decentralization of funding within their own podcast. Do you know what I mean? Because so there has to be some sort of higher level where the podcast hosts all get together and decide what's going to happen, and then down below they then share responsibility within their. Here's what do you think? Just I know you haven't been part of this discussion in the Discord and all that, but you're in the DAO space a lot. What do you make of just listening to all this, and what's your thoughts about maybe how just on surface level? What do you think? Are we heading in the right direction, or do you see a lot of pitfalls here?
No, I think no, we're heading in the right direction. I think there's definitely.
Oh, sorry, that was for Hazel.
Oh, sorry. It's all right.
No, Yves,
No worries. Hey,
go ahead. I feel like.
but Yves, go ahead.
Yeah. No, please go ahead. I was just gonna say.
No, go ahead, Hazel. It's all right.
Yeah, no, I have a ton to learn from both of you because I think like I haven't really I have been like making art independently, but I haven't really thought like a ton about to like artist collectives and people need to eat, that kind of thing, or like the agency side of things, which is super fascinating. I feel like I'm just learning from both of you. Yeah, and yeah, like in the interest of time, I'm not gonna have the concluding thought. I would pass it to you to have the concluding thought.
Yeah, to be honest, I was going to say the same. I'll just give like a quick conclusion because I'm aware of the time. Yeah, I think we're heading in the right direction. I think the kind of what we've been talking about in the Discord. I definitely think there's a need for it. I think it is hard, and I think it starting starting a podcast and sort of like editing and publishing and then the social media aspect, and there's a lot to it, and so I think creators, at least of like long form content, especially if there's a lot of editing involved, they're at a sort of I guess disadvantage when it comes to time, and so adding on having to get sponsors and things and learn how to monetize and pursue that is also a bunch of other tasks and time and energy on top of the existing part of the content creation. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to definitely think about like how can we maybe outsource some of the things that make it harder for creators, especially monetization and sponsorship.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the main thing here with smaller creators. They just don't have the time or the capacity or the resources to do all the things that you just said. So, I think that's a perfect point to end on. I'm going to have a conversation with a group that a friend of mine actually told me about. It's called the Independent Podcast Alliance. They're on Twitter. I think they organize sci-fi related podcasts in an alliance. Kind of what we're talking about here, collectively sharing resources, ideas, guests, monetization, marketing, the whole damn thing. So I'm interested in having that discussion and what comes out of it and how they do it and what sort of Web3 tooling they use, if any, and how much. Let's end it there. I'm sure we'll pick it up, and if not in the next episode, probably a couple episodes down the line as we work in the background on this, but certainly is so important. Guys, just want to thank you again for joining. It's been a really fascinating discussion, especially those first 2 topics. I think we could endlessly just keep chatting about them. Rich, Hazel, Yves, thank you very much. Maybe if you want to, as a last thing, leave everyone with your Twitter handle so they can go off and find you on the tweeting machine. Rich, let's start with you, then we'll go to Hazel and Yves.
Yeah, thank you very much for a nice space. I'll be looking forward to following up with both Hazel and Yves. Appreciate it, Alex. I love meeting new people that are interested in similar things as I. You can get me on the Twitters at Rich Tella or Bitjoin. And yeah, thanks for having us, man.
Awesome. Hazel?
Thanks for having us. Yeah, I would love to follow up with both of your projects. My Twitter is hazeldev and _.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was a cool conversation. My Twitter handle is at Yves Edwards, YVES Edwards, and Fiat Lux podcast on YouTube.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And yeah, thanks for joining everyone and listening. Another fascinating conversation, as always, on Blockchain Solidarity. Join us for the next one again. We'll be back in 3 weeks with a new lineup. But until then, over and out. Thanks for listening, and cheers, guys.